the Romans. The ancient Romans had a saying in their law that said, quote, "Let them who wish to be deceived, be deceived." Quite simply, the Roman law was, if you're so stupid to want to be deceived, go ahead. If you had any brains at all, you do your homework and take many, many days and hours, the kind of thing that Sir Lawrence Gardner does. Spend a lot of time researching, studying, and then you're going to find out, yes, what we're faced with in this world is consensus reality. It has very little to do with the real truth. The real truth, you better wake up and find out, has been around you all of your life. You just didn't see it. A classic example, a humorous one to start with, a more serious later. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this. It's been around for a while. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abe Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy both contain 7 letters. Both presidents were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both of the president's wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday in the head. President Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy, in 1939. Both assassins were known by 3 names, John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. President Lincoln was shot in a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car named Lincoln, made by Ford. John Wilkes Booth ran to a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before they could go to trial. And a week before Lincoln was shot, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A week before Kennedy was shot, he was with Marilyn Monroe. I read you that to impress upon your minds that there is an occult world going on around you. The men in power in this world that we live in are there by divine appointment. So when you hear the term the divine right of kings, you better look at that, because there is such a thing as a divine lineage going on throughout the world that most people just hear and have no comprehension of the implications of our governmental systems over the earth.
During the past 200 years, while the peoples of the world gradually were winning their political freedom from monarchies, the major banking families of the world were nullifying the trend toward representative government by setting up new dynasties of political control, but behind the scenes, in the form of international financial combines. These banking dynasties had learned that all governments, whether they be monarchies or democracies, must borrow money in times of emergency, and that by providing such funds from their own private resources, with strings attached of course, gradually they could bring both kings and democratic leaders under their control. Dr. Quigley believes that people should be more familiar with the identities of these clever banking dynasties. They include such names as Baring, Hambros, Lazard, Erlanger, Warburg, Schroeder, Seligman, the Spires, Mirabeau, Mallet, Fuld, and above all, Rothschild and Morgan.
In order to understand what is happening around us, we have to have a good comprehension of why this system exists, the extent of control it has, as well as the effect it takes on all of our lives. For a great example of the psychological effect this power structure has on us at our current state in history, I would suggest viewers to check out Zeitgeist 3 Moving Forward, which is free on YouTube and other websites. Abraham Lincoln, like John Kennedy, was the creator of the greenback, a format of currency he created to try and help the Union fight the debt that the Civil War was taking on the country. Each citizen received these greenbacks as their own money, and was the legal tender notes in circulation for 100 years, from 1862 until 1971, longer than any type of U.S. currency. These notes are extremely rare now, and have been entirely replaced by Federal Reserve bills. After the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913, a privately owned bank of the Rothschild and Rockefeller families, it is my belief that all the greenbacks were sought out and taken out of circulation to replace with our current type of money. The Rothschild family owned banks all over Europe and were trying to dominate as many countries as possible by controlling its currency, expanding to nearly limitless wealth. Anyone who stood to threaten this monopoly was quickly killed off in order to maintain total control and world domination through capitalism. Perhaps the first to expose these nefarious bloodlines was Fritz Springmeier, author of the book Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Nearly all public media outlets interprets Springmeier as a criminal, because as he was making speeches and exposing this information to the public, he was incarcerated for growing marijuana to pay his bills. In 2003, he was incarcerated again for an alleged involvement in an armed robbery. Many people who have studied this investigation believe that he was set up, and evidence proves this as well. What the media described as a bomb, which was actually a propane tank, blew up during a bank robbery committed by a man no one knows much about, named Forrest Bateman Jr. Fritz was linked to the robbery after Bateman testified that he discussed it with him earlier that day at his home. No direct evidence linked him to the crime, and he served 7 years for something he did not do. Ruling Judge James Redden repeated circumstantial evidence can be used to prove anything. Fritz received an extra 5 years only because a firearm was used in the robbery, and the reason he was set up remains clear. This man knew too much.
Now there are a number of top 13 families. You've got Astor, Bundy, Collins, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Lee, Onassis. Now Reynolds is not one of the top 13, but it's close up there. Rockefeller, Rothschild, Russell, and then you've got your 13th Illuminati bloodline, which is the Merovingian bloodline, which believe that they are descendants of Christ and descendants of Lucifer in the house of David. And you've got the Van Dyne family. So these are your top Illuminati families. Now our prominent bloodlines of the mystery religions, they keep their power and wealth by dynastic intermarriage. They maintain as low of a profile as possible, and they use fronts for legitimacy. Here's some of the information on the Collins. The Rothschild family, for instance, have their own secret genealogies which go clear back to Nimrod. Now who is Nimrod? Nimrod was a great warrior, and remember we talked about the power of Gnostic religions, and he realized as a warrior that he could take the power of the state and combine it with the power of Gnostic religion. And you see an example of that Babylonian system during the Middle Ages, where the Catholic Church was married to the state. If we look at this diagram, we will see the basic structure of the secret Illuminati. Back in 1776, they structured the Illuminati with 13 positions. But around the time of the American Civil War, they restructured it somewhat so that what they created was this first level, your anarchy level here, and then a hierarchy level, and then your special committees and councils. This is very similar to They're very similar to what we saw on our diagram, where you had your, remember on your Gnostic religions, where you had your broad mass religions and your initiate group. On the anarchy level, you'll find thousands of different witchcraft groups that each have their own rituals and their own beliefs, and they look disassociated and unorganized and unrelated. But then, if you are selected to go beyond that, you will enter the hierarchy level, and as a little girl, for instance, you would be part of Sisters of Light, and then as a teenager you'd be inducted into the Mothers of Darkness, and then you would progress to the Grandmother level. And they have many special committees and councils. For instance, your council of 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, your Grand Druid Council, your committee of 300, your committee of 500. Over here, you see represented again that same three-tiered pattern that I was talking about, and this is the Satanic Brotherhood, which is organized in hubs. The Satanic Brotherhood and Illuminati are like this. They're essentially one organization, except the Illuminati is technically Gnostic dualism. They believe that your good deeds must balance your bad deeds. If you were to follow the life of somebody that was inducted through one of the Illuminati orders, like the Order of the Skull and Bones, you'll see that they are tapped as a candidate for first year or night, and a patriarch may rise to leadership within the Skull and Bones. From there, you'll see that they progress to the Council of Foreign Relations, whose equivalent is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, then to the Round Table groups, and then to the Pilgrim Society. The Pilgrim Society is far more powerful than Council of Foreign Relations, although very few people know about it and talk about it. And now we're going to discuss very briefly with you, to get my pen, point. We're going to discuss very briefly with you the basic policy process within the United States. Of course, as you can see, it's not what the people think it is. We're going to go through this very quickly. This is worthy of maybe a few books. Here at the top, on the international level, on the top satanic levels, decisions are being made. Those decisions are being passed down to the national level. If you go back in the occult world, you'll read a man named Plato, and he talks about the wise men ruling. That occult concept was passed on down, and you'll read in Francis Bacon's book, The New Atlantis, which originally had a title with the word of Rosicrucian, that they wanted to create a group of wise men to rule in the New World, and that concept has indeed been implemented. That study group or wise men group is called Majesty 12, and it's been given a lot of code names. They just sometimes just seem to happen to meet each other. And originally it was set up 6 men from the executive committee of the Jason Society, 6 men of the executive committee of the Jason Group, and 6 men of other key positions along with the chairman. And I believe in Reagan's administration they upped the number to 40. And this group on their classified papers has the word magic, M-A-J-I-C, stamped on it. But they can't make all the decisions. So they pass some of the decisions on to the policy planning groups, which I've listed over here: the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Brookings Institute, the Business Roundtable, the American Enterprise Institute, the Population Council, Resources for the Future, and the Urban Institute. But those people can't make all the decisions, so they pass them on down the line, some of them on down the line, to the research policy planning groups, such as the RAND Corporation, the Stanford Research Institute, and the Hudson Institute. Now, how does this work in actuality? Let's say the Illuminati have made a decision as to something they want to implement. They'll get somebody, say the president, to announce, we have a problem. Then the president will say, we have a problem. We need to initiate a government study of this problem. And then they will pour millions of dollars into a government study and maybe after 10 years come up with a large number of findings that are printed in these thick books that even researchers like myself don't wade through. And the bottom line is the decision that they had decided upon long ago. And then they get their opinion makers, government councils, national news medias, and intelligence agencies to help them out to make it appear like there's grassroots support at different levels. And so the legislators say, we had this problem, we did this study, this is the best advice, and they pass a law. Now if they have any problems along the way, they have their covert enforcers like the Mafia and the IRS and FBI and ADL to smooth out the opposition.
1960. John Kennedy was elected president 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy both contain 7 letters. Both presidents were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both of the president's wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday in the head. President Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 19... Example, a humorous one to start with, a more serious later. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this. It's been around for a while. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abe Lincoln was elected president in 18... And take many, many days and hours, the kind of thing that Sir Lawrence Gardner does. Spend a lot of time researching, studying, and then you're going to find out, yes, what we're faced with in this world is consensus reality. It has very little to do with the real truth. The real truth, you better wake up and find out, has been around you all of your life. You just didn't see it. A classic, the Romans. The ancient Romans had a saying in their law that said, quote, "Let them who wish to be deceived, be deceived." Quite simply, the Roman law was, if you're so stupid to want to be deceived, go ahead. If you had any brains at all, you do your homework.